Okay, Nelson, any addition?
Thanks, Jolie. I was very curious about this session today and just getting to hear, because it's a wide thing and it goes both way, not just male. So we concentrate on male and then forget about female, because if we do that, then 2030 now we'll be saying we'll now want to talk about to involve women, because we will forget about them, and probably by then it will be worse. But I also agree to some point. Yes, it mostly affects men, and we need to then sit down with those that doesn't affect so much, like you women, and hear your part. And for all this that I've also been hearing is you talk a lot. You share your problems. Today you have a breakup. In the few minutes you call your friend. You're having some 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 coffee out there and sharing and laughing about it. But for most men, we go into a cocoon, and then we like separate ourselves from all other things. The only thing we see is a sharp object, a knife. The only thing we see is a gun if we are policemen. The only thing we see is a weapon, and that leads us to kill ourselves. Yeah, and I don't know if I can also go ahead and mention a risk factor, and you tell me if I'm right. Talking about the police and the army, sometimes they're being sent to go to war. I had somebody mentioning to his mother, I'm going to war in Somalia. And the mom saying, you want to commit suicide? Is that part of suicide we want to talk about today? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nelson. Of course, whatever you've shared is also like a risk factor, because many parents especially believe that when their kid, or rather, I think it happens mostly, ukipata these KDF people, or rather the policemen, when they go to war, the probability of them returning alive is, I think, 10% out of 100. So that's why maybe the parents reacted that way. Like, you're going for war in Somalia, so you want to kill yourself, or rather get yourself killed. And sadly, it's their nature of work, so they have no option. If you survive, well and good. If you don't, ni bahati yako mbaya pia. So that one is, it's ni ngumu kunini kusema, because you never know, wewe umetoka umeenda kazi, but your likelihood of coming back is a bit risky. So of course, other risk factors, I see Sarah has mentioned bullying. Someone who has been bullied for long, especially in men, though it both affects men and women. People who are bullied when they were young, growing up, they are likely to attempt suicide or even die by suicide, because they're used to bullying. So they believe that anyone around them is just after kuwa bully. So they prefer, let me just go get myself killed, because I cannot start. I've been through bullying since I was young. Umefika secondary, you're still getting bullied. You get to university, because we have places, we have universities that still people get bullied. As much as there's that freedom, but we have universities that people still get bullied, depending on the kind of people you work with, or the kind of peers that you keep. So bullying is also one of a risk factor, especially if someone experienced it growing up. Another thing that also leads to both women, and now I'm talking about both men and women, to attempt suicide or even die by suicide, is child maltreatment. Most times we have these homes penye mtoto anatritiwa vibaya. So growing up, huo mtoto anaona tu ya amezoea kutritiwa vibaya, amezoea kutritiwa vibaya. Then when he or she grows up, she gets into the society. the society also haimu accept vizuri, maybe inamtreat vibaya. Of course, this child is likely to attempt suicide or even die by suicide. Something else that also is a risk factor is mental health disorder, histories of familia. They always say, especially for suicide, if someone committed or someone died by suicide in your family, the likelihood of it recurring in future ni high sana. I don't know whether that is true ama tu ni superstition, but research also talks about it. It says that family history of any mental health disorder contributes highly to it's a risk factor to someone attempting suicide or dying by suicide. Yes, Musa, before I move on, you can see your hand is up.
Yes, maybe kuongezea on that, can you say also dissatisfaction and disappointments pia ni risk factors? E.g. maybe mtoi amefanya exam, then inakuwa kwamba mtoi hawezi enda high school, maybe ni wa class 8 ama amemaliza high school, hawezi enda college because ya maybe school fees. So mtoi anaona ni kama life yake imeisha. Yeah, so hajakuwa satisfied na venye maybe wazazi wake wamemwambia kwamba hakuna pesa, ama amekuwa disappointed kwa life, so anaamua kujitoa uhai, because tumepata pia such cases where pale watu wamejitoa uhai ama amefail exam, amejapata ile marks alikuwa anataka. So hiyo pia mtu anaona amekuwa amedisappoint maybe familia na maybe yeye mwenyewe hajakuwa satisfied na whatever amepata. So pia hiyo tunaweza classify kama risk factor. Thanks.
Yes, it actually is a risk factor. I think hata kwa news tumekuwa tukiona sometimes even the pressure of parents alone towards their kids. Usipokuwa number 1 utafanya hivi na hivi. Some parents even go to an extent of threatening the kids that if you fail, sijui ndakupeleka ushago, if you fail ndakupeleka ukalime. So such things unapata when now that kid fails, anaona nikirudi home it will be a stressing issue, so I better just kill myself. So yes, it is a risk factor. The disappointments, especially for you as a person and even towards your community and parents. Something else also that is Zach, yes.
Mimi nilikuwa nataka kuongezea kwa hiyo disappointment. Kuna topic tuliongelea sometimes back about pressure za kuomoka. Like me na feel like most men wako na pressure, like you are expected to be rich at kuna age yenye maybe 30, kwanza hata si 30, from maybe 25 unafaa uko umesha move out from your parents house. 30 unafaa sijui ati uko na gari ama uko na nini. 35 uko na watoto like kuna hizo pressures, timelines zenye tumewekewa zinatupea pressure sana. Alafu sasa ukiona your friends are are doing it better than you are doing, inaweza kuforce, unasema hey, life pia haina mimi, wacha nijitoe. Yeah, hiyo ndio contribution.
Thank you, Zach. I'll read something else from the chat box. Stella says, can love affair be a factor? Because there are some men who dhani hawawezi kataliwa na msichana, wanajitambua sana wakikataliwa. They get low self-esteem. Yes, I remember in our previous conversation, we alluded to men finding the comfort in having a relationship or just having a family. And them being rejected actually is a risk factor to them dying by suicide. And we have also seen these things in news. Easy intimate love triangle gone wrong, issues kama hizo kwa TV. Like you find maybe some guy wants to date you, or rather they've invested in you relationship wise. It could be financially, they've taken you, for in this case a girl, to school, then they want a relationship with you. But on the other hand, for you, you see it as just a favor. Like you huoni kama kuna expectations zenye zinahitajika from your side. So when that man has invested in you, you end up disappointing them and not wanting to be in a relationship with them. And most men actually have an issue with facing rejection. So the way they face rejection is they either kill that girl, then kill themselves, or rather kill themselves because of being rejected. And we've seen such stories or rather cases in kwa news sahi, like it's the in thing, people love triangles, watu wanauana because kuna hiyo labda mtu alirejectiwa because they invested so much in that relationship and they were expecting so much from that relationship, but they were disappointed. So therefore, love issues in a way is also a risk factor when it comes to suicide. Of course, generally, as we talk about love also, we can just allude it to toxic relationship or rather violence in dating. Violence in dating is also a risk factor in relationships that results to one attempting suicide and even one dying by suicide. For example, you find there's this relationship, maybe nowadays both men and women are violent in relationships. So unapata maybe bwanako anakuchapa ama bibi yako anakuchapa. The likelihood of you coming out to talk about it ni ngumu. And especially when you face your circle of friends, people will start judging you. Hey, uko kwa relationship na unapigwa, especially if it's a man. I remember when Wetangula's case ilikuja kwa TV amepigwa na bibi yake. So many people walianza kumuingilia, like wanashanga, how can a whole man be beaten by the wife? In fact, even people started doubting about it. So you find even when men experience violence in relationship, the likelihood of the society believing that you're actually going through a toxic relationship ni ngumu, because as a society tumekuwa raised up to believe that mwanaume hawezi chapwa na mwanamke, but we have such cases happening, and such cases ndo zinafanya pia, like even as a man you feel bad ukiji-express, hakuna mtu atakusikiza, umeshakuwa nako ka notion, because most times when you come out people will start judging you instead of people helping you. So that is also another risk factor. Any other contribution from the audience? We have so many of them. Alcohol and drug abuse are very common risk factor. You find someone akona stress flani ameingia kwa drug and alcohol abuse, then they find it hard to get out from there. So the only options they think about is killing themselves, and even and they end up dying by suicide. So alcohol and drug abuse is also another risk factor. Also, another risk factor is community violence, especially if umereziwa up in a community yenye vita zimekuanga tu on and off. You've been raised in war season. So unapata already that behavior ya war imesha kuingilia. So when anything small happens to you, unaona two option, let me just die. So violent community is also another risk factor. And another risk factor, of course, is previous suicidal ideations. If someone already thought about suicide na kupata help, most times they are likely to now go ahead and even act on it and die by suicide. So once maybe a friend or someone you know amekuja kwako akakwambia, oh, maybe I feel like killing myself, kindly, if you can, try talk to them, try lead them to help, because the likelihood of them actually attempting now that suicide and ending up dying is a high chance. So when you know of someone who has previously had a suicide ideation, it is a risk factor already. So if you can help them, please do. Also, of course, suicide attempts, watu wamejaribu kujiua before, they definitely will kill themselves eventually if not helped And also, lastly, there is also a history of any mental health disorder, especially issues around anxiety, personality disorders, and major depressive disorders. Maybe is Grace here? Grace can elaborate more for us on that if she's on. She's left. Grace, are you on?
Yes, Julie, I am. Maybe kindly you can just repeat the question.
There is this people who have an history of mental health disorder, especially personality disorders, depressive disorder, and anxiety issues, that they are likely to attempt suicide or rather die by suicide. Like what leads to that?
I guess mostly when you find yourself living with a mental disorder, the stigma, mostly from the society, and even at the workplace, I don't know if anyone who is living with an personality disorder or anxiety mood disorder kama ameambia boss wake, this is what I'm living with. And so you'll find most people don't really come don't open up to that, and so isolation begins, and they feel like maybe the world does not understand them. And so when something happens to them that is a negative, um so the negative part of the problem plus the disorder they are having becomes now those are two risk factors, and it's now they have a higher uh, chance of opting to die by suicide. And so I think it just stems from stigma, just from the word go, just saying that this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I've been living with as a person. So I think if there's anybody probably who has any other additional comment to that, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Grace. Captain, I can see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I actually do have something to say about that. And from what I have read, if I am not wrong, so anyone can correct me if I am wrong, but those who have ADHD have a higher likelihood of getting into drugs and alcohol and any other kinds of addictive substances. And as a result, have a higher tendency to commit suicide. So yes, I agree with you that those with previous mental illnesses have a higher chance of falling to suicide.
Thank you so much, Captain. I can also read from the chat box. Vicky says, our background or upbringing can lead to one suffering from imposter syndrome. This is when one is self-sabotaging themselves, which leads to anxiety, paranoia, emotional distress, one feeling isolated and invisible when one doesn't celebrate the small wins because of the high goals that they did not achieve. And that makes them feel less of themselves and could lead to suicide or suicidal thoughts. Yes, I agree. Most times, imposter syndrome is a really, really big challenge, especially among the youths right now. Unapata, most people, they've not seen other people's journey. So whenever they see like a celebrity excelling and celebrating their wins, they also want to celebrate their wins the same way. So they'll end up maybe wanakuwa na fake life in the social media that is not even their real life. Maybe in real life, haujiwezi completely, but pale kwa social media you want to portray yourself, unaenda kwa these high-end hotels, you're going to these so many trips, but at the back of your mind, you can't afford those trips, you can't afford those hizo places, expensive, the high-end hotels, but because you want to fit in the society, it makes you feel that way. And most times when now people discover that this is not actually your real life, then that the person is likely to either attempt suicide and even die by suicide at the end of the day because of the shame. This is not you, this is the fake you. So when people discover that you're a fake person and you cannot face it, then you choose to die or even kill yourself. So yes, imposter syndrome is a really big challenge. Then suffering from chronic diseases can also be a factor. Yes, I have heard of cases where people, especially what who maybe may experience stories of cancer because of one on it's like they are a burden to their families. Most of them actually take even pills and just decide to kill themselves because they no longer, as in wanafilako ka pain. You're used to being very okay, very healthy. Now you can't do anything. Maybe you cannot even ease yourself. Unajiona ni kama you're a burden to your family, you're a burden to your spouse. So the best way is to attempt suicide and die by suicide. And it also could affect family and friends. And yes, true. Some people who suffer from these chronic diseases, when they attempt the suicides or kill themselves, of course, their families are likely to suffer. And I was also reading somewhere that higher rates of suicide deaths among male may be associated with higher prevalence of externalized disorder. For example, conduct disorders, like this someone is exposed to antisocial behaviors, aggressive property destruction, or substance use and disorder, and even deviant behaviors like robbery, theft, etc. So you'll find that higher rates among male, especially male youths, may also be associated with such issues. Labda someone has discovered you're into theft, ama you use drugs, and you didn't want them to discover that. So the best option you see is to attempt suicide and die by suicide. So there's that issue of men being prevalent to externalizing disorders that is a risk factor to them attempting suicide and hence dying by suicide. Any other addition before we move on? Any other inputs before we move on? Other risk factors?
Julie, maybe I can add one more. Physical disability. Perhaps you are not born with it. Along the way you become disabled, maybe through an accident, it becomes another major risk factor to wanting to attempt suicide. Thank you.
Yes, physical disability is also another issue, especially, this is especially to men, because men have this pride, like they can do everything. In fact, men don't even like being sick. So even when they are also sick, most of them wanaonanga kama wako very weak. So that weakness in itself inaweza mfanya atake ku attempt suicide and hence dying by suicide. Yes, Musa?
Can we also say that maybe internet and technology is also a risk factor? How? Maybe mtu ameona kitu kwa internet na anataka kuijaribu out of curiosity. Yeah? Pia inaweza peleka tu mtu hapo.
Yes, that's true. Now we will go to the specific risk factors for suicide attempts, especially we will start with female. In females, we have, of course, dating violence. We see most times violence in itself just affects women because in most relationships, you will find that men are the perpetrators. So this lady, for them to overcome that relationship, most of them will result into killing themselves, so that they also don't face the society ati wewe umechapwa ama uko na maalama umekuwa disabled just because of a relationship. Another thing is also eating disorders, and I think is it states ama unapatanga most children, especially wale wako na eating disorders na wanakuwa obese ama wako na eating disorders and they are too thin, they are likely to get bullied. And when they get bullied, they are likely to attempt to, and hii sana sana ina affect females because females ndo tunakuanga na body issues sana sana. I know there are some males who have issues, but it is more common in women, or rather girls, adolescent girls, especially growing up. You want this perfect body, you want utaki kukaa, utaki kunona, so unapata unajinyima hata chakula. Then when you jinyima chakula, ukikuwa tena too thin, people will start talking. And when people start talking, it will get to you, and you will have self-esteem issues. And as a result, you end up attempting suicide and dying by suicide. Another thing, of course, is post-traumatic stress disorders, especially if you went through a traumatic episode growing up, or even as a grown-up, and it likely happens again. You're likely now to end up attempting suicide. For example, if a girl is a victim of rape and they end up getting raped again, the likelihood of them seeking to attempt suicide and die by suicide is high, because probably people already know you were raped. Then when you get raped again, your self-esteem already ishashuka. Then huoni kama you'll be accepted by anyone in this, maybe in your community. So alafu pia kuna zile traditional, or si traditional, kuna cultures zingine, if you're a rape victim, you won't get married. They even like stigmatize against you, and you wonder if ilikuwa mistake yako. Sometimes, of course, it was mtu, when you grow up, or when you go out, when you dress up, when you're in your home, unajua uko safe, so you don't expect someone to come rape you. And it's unfortunate that now when you get raped, instead of people seeing you as the victim, sasa unaonekana ni kama wewe ndio una victim blameiwa sasa, and you end up resulting to commit suicide, to attempt suicide and die by suicide. Something else that I also read is that also for women, a previous abortion is also a risk factor to attempting suicide, or rather dying by suicide. So maybe you attempted abortion, it didn't go through, then maybe your parents didn't know you're pregnant, or your friends didn't know you're pregnant, and now they see it and it failed. Instead of now you coming to face the society with this pregnancy that did not get aborted, unaona afadhali udai. Musa, you want to speak still? I can see your hand is still up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay. So any other risk factors in females before now we proceed to specific risk factors in men? Any addition from the public? I know tumeongea sana juu ya men, but now we were specifically talking about women. Any other thing that I might have, it might have escaped my mind, probably, that is a risk factor to specifically women attempting suicide? Aside from violence, aside from the eating disorders, aside from the post-traumatic stress disorders, aside from the previous abortion, any other thing? Someone wants to speak? Yes, David? Okay. I think also another risk factor for women is also early pregnancy. Most times you find, even in relationships, unapata most women, or rather girls, wanogopanga mimba. They rather get the STIs, they rather get HIV, but not mimba, because mimba itaonekana ni physical. But at the end of the day, mtu anasahau, you will give birth to this child, and of course your life won't go back to normal as it used to be, but eventually you'll adapt to it. Rather than when you get now the STIs, ama HIV, it's something yenye utalive nayo your whole lifetime. hautapona ama ita escalate to other diseases. So early pregnancies or rather unplanned pregnancies, to me, I feel like is a risk factors for women attempting suicide. Yes, Musa?
Pia tunaweza sema societal expectation whereby maybe umeolewa na haupati watoto. Yeah, so unakaa kwa hiyo marriage na unaweza kuwa frustrated because society expect a lot from you in terms of procreation and yet hawezi deliver. So through that watu wengine pia hasa wanadada wanaamua kujitia kitanzi.
Yes, thank you, Musa, for bringing that up. And also, it's also unfortunate that in most cases when, especially in a marriage, hakuna mtoto, most people turn out to women. And they forget that we also have inaitwa impotent men, or rather men wenye hawawezi zalisha. But because society ili raise men to believe that they are already, they can reproduce, they can reproduce, ama they can procreate, then whenever there's an issue of childbirth in marriages, most times itarushiwa tu kwa wanawake, and that woman will end up carrying that burden and choose to attempt suicide because in-laws wako on her neck, maybe her friends wengine washaza watoto, now people have started talking, now the stigma. And it's also unfortunate pia, like nowadays kuna other options. In fact, siku hizi vitu ni cheaper kidogo, especially surrogacy, kuadopt mtoto. Kuna hizo other options, but people still feel like them giving birth to their own kids because society ili to raise mtu lazima azae mtoto wake, hiyo pressure gets to most people, and as a result, because huwezi zaa venye tu Musa amesema, utapata mtu ataenda up attempt suicide alafu amekufa by suicide. From the chat, Vicky says, end of a relationship or marriage, people are not equipped with proper stress coping. Sorry, my internet, I think, has issues. Vicky was saying that in most relationships, you find that when relationship end, people are not equipped with better coping skills. So you'll find most people, especially divorce, and that was something I was to say next. Most men, in fact, attempt suicide more as a result of separation and divorce. Apparently, I was reading somewhere that most men, divorce affects men excessively than even women. So you'll find that divorce, or rather separation from families, you've grown with this family, ama you have this your family, and when you now separate with your family, especially for men, it's a risk factor to them committing suicide, to them attempting suicide and dying by suicide. And also parental separation, especially for boy child, when they are growing up, when their parents separate, they are likely to attempt suicide. I don't know why that is in boys mostly, or rather in men. Maybe the men here can tell us why they think that parental separation or divorce is a risk factor to them, ama to other men and other boys attempting suicide or dying by suicide. Ningependa kusikia mchango yenu wanaume towards this. Do we agree that separation or divorce is a risk factor to men? The men here, any thoughts on that? Okay, so there's no contributions to that. So I'll believe the research was right by saying that it is a risk factor in males, parental separation and divorce. Of course, exposure to a suicidal friend is also another risk factor in males attempting suicide. Your thoughts on this, the males here? Okay, so I assume that one is also the case.
Sorry, what's that? I didn't quite understand.
Like exposure to a suicidal friend. Maybe a friend of yours wanted to attempt suicide or attempted suicide. You're likely to also get the influence of you attempting suicide.
I see. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense because you have this friend who is who you're close to, you have this emotional connection to, and then suddenly they're having these depressing thoughts and these rather dark tendencies. So these tendencies, since you're this emotionally connected to this person, you become, they kind of rub off on you, and you end up being depressed yourself. Like this thing about mirror neurons, you feel what this other person feels, empathy. You feel empathy for somebody, you feel somebody's hurt. So over time, of course, this kind of has an impact on you, and you end up having suicidal ideation. So yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain. And then, of course, access to firearms, pesticide, and toxic gas. And I think Musa asked this when we started, like the reason why most men are committing this, is it because they are getting too much access to these firearms, to these pesticides, to this toxic gas? And if yes, how can we prevent this from happening? Because we also research says that most men die by suicide because of the same things, the firearms. They use firearms to attempt the act. They use pesticides, they use toxic gas, they use harmful, maybe harmful tools to do the same. So how can we prevent this from happening? Or rather, is this something that is happening? Is it that men are getting too much access to these firearms, to these pesticides? What's your thought on that?
Hi,
Captain?
hi again.
Yes, somebody was talking before me. Or should I take?
Nelson, you were talking. I think Nelson had raised his hand. Nelson?
Okay, I wanted Captain to go first, but it's okay. I can say when it comes to suicide, you can't tag anything that maybe a gun is kind of the main tool used, because somebody who wants to commit suicide can do it using anything, anything. I've read on news, they just hang with a sheet, they just climb a tree, something that you can't expect somebody to use, they use. So I can't tag necessarily on that, because if we, for example, tag on guns, and if we go on the recent cases where police were doing all that, you see, you can't prevent police from carrying a gun. He has to carry a gun. So we need just to continue such education that this thing is bad. And for those who are a bit stressed, we are close by them, try to know their family. Nyumba Kumi initiative, know your neighbor. Yes. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Nelson. Unfortunately, it's research that says that. So until now, maybe another research comes up, it can tell us more on that. Captain, you had something to say?
Yeah, but sorry, my connection must have disappeared. I missed most of what I think it was Nelson, what he said. But what I was going to say is taking away arms, guns, pesticides, and all these hangman's nooses is just, I don't think it's going to help, because all of these things are going to exist forever. it's just taking away the means of committing suicide, because math teacher used to tell me that there's so many ways to kill a rat. There's also just as many ways to kill a human. So what you should do, I think what we should do as practitioners, mental health practitioners, is find the cause of the problem. Like figure out what is making these men behave the way they are, why they have these distorted versions of what relationships look like or what a man is supposed to be, and perhaps do that through introducing mentorship programs or just becoming responsible fathers one generation at a time. Of course, this is not going to take care of itself overnight. I mean, people are still going to kill themselves for a variety of reasons. I mean, you even heard of the Jonestown massacres. That was basically a mass suicide brought about by mass hysteria. So, of course, finding the cause and figuring out how to psychoeducate men and women alike and people in the LGBT community, because even it's a huge risk for them, because there's a higher probability if you're transsexual or transitioning that you have a higher chance of killing yourself than somebody who's not. So it's important to have these resources available for Kenyans to figure out for themselves how they can go about this life of theirs without having to go through much adversity.
Thank you so much. I think both you and Nelson have shared the same thing. Like, if someone wants to kill themselves, they still can, because again, these firearms will always be there. These pesticides will always be there. These toxic materials will always be there. So we really need to, especially for men, I think we've had this conversation even in our previous engagements, that especially for men, we should really look into the root causes of these issues that men have that leads them or escalates their need to attempt suicide. We really need to look beyond just the normal data that we are given out here in terms of them having access to firearms, them having access to pesticides. I think it's more that, and most something that was shared, I think, in the previous conversation was also that we look into programs that now empower men more, because we have so many programs empowering women, but we don't have the same kind of programs that empower men, especially if they lose their jobs. What next? How can they face these issues of job loss, of not having a job, of being financially unstable? Like, what can be done for men to face this in a way that does not necessarily have to include them wanting to attempt suicide? So I think with that, as we conclude our session, I'd love now to hear what are some of these prevention strategies, or rather intervention, that we have to help now prevent men and women from attempting suicide or even from having suicidal thoughts. So what are some of these interventions or these proposals that we can give, we that are here, to help a suicidal friend of ours, someone that wants to attempt suicide? What can we do to help them? I want to hear from you guys. We've been having these conversations throughout the week. So what are some of these strategies? What are some of these proposals that we can give that can help at least reduce some of the suicidal cases, especially to our next friends, not even like those outside there? If someone just next to us has an issue or wants to attempt suicide or is suicidal, what can we do to help them? Yes, Captain?
First, I think the most important thing is just psychoeducation, educating people about mental health availability in this country. For example, there's a toll-free number, I think it's 1199, provided by the Red Cross, where you can speak to a counselor for free at any time. So people can use that resource, and if they're having any problems, they can just simply do that. Another one is on Bonga by Capital FM, where you just anonymously type whatever it is that is on your heart, and then a psychologist is going to come and respond to you immediately. So that's another resource that I know of. And yeah, just having this awareness, having these conversations, and having media sensitivity towards these topics is something that I'd suggest to be to help at least curb the issue. Not, of course, it will go over time, but it will not. It will at least help the issue.
Thank you so much, Captain. I love the last one, the media sensitivity. I think also media reporting in a way contributes to an increase to these suicidal cases because of the way the reports are being done. And I'm glad that I think it's this week, we have media people that are going through some training on how they can do reportings, especially on mental health cases. And I think that is already a start of them being trained on how to do the reportings so that they cannot escalate the issues, because most times when these reportings are done, these cases keep increasing day by day. And it's an issue that for now I can say is we are trying, because we already have a training that is ongoing, and I think it has been ongoing this week. Yes, Grace? Grace?
Yes, Jolie. So just to go a bit deeper into how to ensure that suicide cases decrease is to when someone is maybe typing something that is troubling them on social media, I think our first response should now be just wanting to know what they are feeling than thinking that they are seeking attention. So if as a society we can begin from kuangalia huyu mtu, they are not seeking attention, they are genuinely asking for help. Na kama unajua huwezi msaidia, you should not, as in acha tu na yeye and just connect them to someone who can, badala ya kukejeli na kumake. So for me, I think that can be one of the major points as a society tunaweza anzia kuangalia tu huyu mtu, they're not seeking attention, they are crying for help, so just help as you can.
Thank you, Grace. I think, Captain, you had something else to add before Grace spoke.
No, I was just putting down my hand. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? What strategies, interventions, proposals that can help prevent, especially suicide cases, that can help prevent them and that can also help reduce these suicide cases? I'll start pinpointing those who have not spoken. Yes, Musa?
Maybe when we look into records, when HIV/AIDS came and stigma was on the rise, the government tried to come up with a way of dealing with these issues by employing people called CHVs, that is community health volunteers. I think maybe when it comes to matters mental health in regards to suicide prevention, the government should also do the same. As much as we employ our own psychologists, psychiatrists, and what have you, the government should also do the same. As in, they employ people to go and talk to people down in the communities, down in the grassroots, because that is where the problem starts. Kwa sababu gani? Mtu anaweza kuwa amekuwa na some suicidal attempts, but hajaongeleshwa vizuri, ama alienda maybe for a counseling session just once and that was it. Yeah, so if maybe kuna follow up to that effect, people who go talk to those people down there, maybe inaweza curb the rise in suicide, or rather attempts in suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Musa. And I think whatever you've shared, that is something that is being preached outside here, like using CHVs to do maybe psychological first aid, especially for people that are going through mental health issues, and also raising awareness and informing people that these issues are there and people can seek help. And also the fact that follow-ups, I think where we go wrong is we just help someone, but we never do follow-up. So that for doing a follow-up is very, very important. And I think more emphasis should be put on that. And then David Quillin says, encourage the person to communicate with you. When someone says he or she is thinking about suicide or says things that sound as if the person is considering suicide, it can be very upsetting. You may not be sure what to do to help, whether you should talk of suicide seriously or if your intervention might make the situation worse. Taking action is always the best choice, according to me, and doing a follow-up. Thank you, David. Yeah, sometimes we may think by talking we are helping someone, but in a way, we have people who interpret our helping someone differently. You'll find that for you, you think that you're helping this person, but at the end of the day, you realize that actually you are not helping them. Maybe you approached the issue differently, depending on how the person was expecting you to approach it. Maybe you approached it in a way that they did not like, and in that sense, it actually makes the situation worse, because it's the same way when I share a problem to a friend, I'd expect that maybe they back me up. And sometimes you'll find that that issue is a bit issue 50-50, then maybe that friend of mine chooses to not actually relate with whatever I'm relating. I'm likely to take it bad, vibaya. So it's the same way in the issues of maybe this suicidal person expected you to act or respond in a manner that they'd wanted, but you instead responded in a way that you thought actually works for them, but instead it makes the situation worse. So even as we try talking to them, let's try see how best to approach a situation so that isimkwaze and they end up now attempting the suicide that you thought you were preventing. So let's be very keen on how we approach people, especially when they have a problem. And let's also have boundaries, even when we want to help. It's actually very, very important to have boundaries when you want to help. Maybe Grace can tell us more on if a way to approach someone who is suicidal from experience. What's the best way, or rather the ideal way, to approach someone who is suicidal?
Okay. Thank you, Julie, for that question. So for someone who is not a professional, you might not, unaweza kuwa unashindwa how you can go about it, because it can be a bit scary. However, when someone tells you they are contemplating to die by suicide, to kill themselves, don't panic. Please, hata kama una panic kama una panic, iweke na ndani, usimuonyeshe. Just try and be neutral as possible. Listen to them. Msikize kwanza. Usimdismiss haraka kumwambia ai ni nini nataka ujue, and the way life is precious. To you life lakini kwake hiyo time life imeacha ku make sense na amekosa hope. So number 1, don't panic. Number 2, listen from their own point of view. Hata kama shida yake ni kidogo according to you, kwake ni kubwa. Now from there, if you feel as if the conversation is going on well and this person is somehow able to open up, you can now begin like a simple statement like, I'm concerned about you, I care about you, and I would love to know where these thoughts have come from. So now you're able to now begin, you begin knowing the root cause. Maybe akianza ku open up. At some point, you can go an extra mile and just ask them, do you have any plan? Like, have you like thought of any plan? Are you able to easily access the weapons or the method in that plan? Are you able to access or to actualize your plan? So, and where will you get these weapons from? I know your conversation inakaa ni kama you're encouraging, but at the end of the day, remember, you're just trying to gain information. Ndio ikifika mahali, and now inafika mahali you have to report maybe to the police, just to maybe a family or a friend, or even a counselor, a mental health practitioner. You already have information, because this is the kind of information we will ask you. Like, if you come and tell me, Grace, there is someone who wants to die by suicide, nitakwambia ako wapi sahi, anafanya nini, ameplan kufanya nini, ataifikia aje, ni nani marafiki wake. Those are the simple questions I'll probably ask you. And so kindly don't be really afraid to get to know what if they're able to access weapons, if they have them, and if they open up and tell you that they do have the weapons. Now begin telling them on how we can, either both of you can work towards a plan ya kuondoa hiyo access to that weapon. Because remember, you're trying to save a life first. Before you begin to try and solve, you're first saving a life. And so that should be your priority at first. Now, please connect them to family and friends. Call family and friend of that person. Connect them to a counselor, someone who can help them. Usiwaache hapo. Because remember, another risk factor of someone dying by suicide is that they once attempted. And you'll find most suicidal cases ni zile mtu aliwahi attempt kitambo pia na ikabako. So please usimwache hapo. Connect them to someone. At Nzumari, we are offering free psychosocial support at whatever time of the day, hata usiku. So yes, connect these people. Hizo hotlines kama your Red Cross, very effective. Connect the person. Now, for someone who is not able to really open up, and you know for sure huyu hatafunguka because umeangalia na umemobserve, usimwache hapo pia, na usifanye hiki kitu peke yako. Now, pigia mtu mwingine simu akusaidie, but don't leave that person hapo. Don't be judgmental, don't panic, relax. Na hata wewe kama hiyo experience imekusumbua sana, even you get help and just remove that trauma. Yeah, I think I've answered the question.
Thank you so much, Grace, for enlightening us on that. Also, Trevor says, I think the government should be keen on strengthening economic supports by creating more employment opportunities, especially for youths who resort to suicide when life gets rough and tough. Just ensuring youths have avenues of financial security helps. Yes, and I concur with you on that. It's about time that the government strengthens, of course, economic support for young people. But I know the governments keep saying, kazi iko, pesa ya youth iko, but most times I don't know who accesses these resources. I don't know if it's people, especially at the grassroots level, ni kama hawananga hiyo information, or how does it go about it? Because I know kuna youth fund in place, na kuna hii nini ya Ministry of Youth inaitwa. There's also, I don't know if it's kuna kazi or something. There are those projects by the government. However, who it reaches, hata mimi siko sure ni kina nani, but I agree it's important for our government to ensure and strengthen those economic supports for young people, because it will help reduce suicide attempts and even suicide cases. Yes, Captain?
Yes, on top of the government, sorry, responding to the government issues, as far as I know, suicide in Kenya is illegal. If you attempt suicide, you can be arrested and tried. So maybe we should probably do something about that legislation and try and get it out of the way, because obviously, if you attempt suicide, there's probably something in your environment that is not right. And making it illegal is not helping the issue. So I feel like the government has to do something about the legislation. We should start from somewhere. That's my opinion.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. And it's one of the mental health task force recommendation that suicide be decriminalized, because most times, most people that actually attempt suicide, it's not that they do it because they want to. There must be something that made them do whatever they made them want to attempt that suicide, and making it a criminal offense is therefore an issue. That's why you'll find that hata mtu attempt suicide anaomba sana akufe ndio asiende kukuwa tried, because once you attempt na usikufe, if the law gets to you, utashikwa na ukae jela. So yes, it's about time the government decriminalizes suicide, and it's a conversation that is still ongoing. I hope that it will be implemented soon, because EO itself is already stigmatizing mental health issues, because suicide is one of is a mental health issue. So already that is stigma against it, and the fact that now you're seen as a lawbreaker is also an issue on top of it. So yes, it's important that suicide be decriminalized. So any other addition before we close our session? Frank, Rita, Euphemius, Jawaskia, Kolo. Any contribution from you guys before we close the session? Or maybe one last thing, of course, is to encourage people to go for therapy and inform people that there are actually avenues they can get help. We have support groups, we have therapy, we have free counseling sessions that we offer at Nzumari. I know counseling itself is expensive. Mental health services are actually expensive in our country, but we have the places that offer free services. Like at Nzumari Africa, we have a psychologist on board, and therefore we offer free psychosocial support. However, I know for clinical, especially if it is a psychiatric issue, which I believe most of these psychiatric cases, they zinakuwa psychiatric cases because huku chini someone didn't get the right avenue to get help. So if people can get help at the grassroots level or at the community level, like the psychosocial support, then we can avoid them getting to that psychiatric stage. So even us ourselves, through the PFA, psychological first aid trainings, if we can also get access to that as people at the grassroots level, at the community levels, then we can be able to help people, and these cases can actually get prevented and they cannot even reach the psychiatric level, because when it gets now to the psychiatric level, it gets even more expensive because medication is in place. We have some people are hospitalized. So if we can find a way in which at the community level, just as Musa said, training these CHVs to give this information, giving people information even through our social media platforms, advocating for these services as mental health advocates, referring people to help, these issues can be prevented. So therefore, be the help you can wherever you are. Of course, sometimes you cannot offer that help yourself, but if you can be able to refer someone to where they can get help, kindly do it, because you will save a life. So I'd love to end the session, and as we end the session, I'd love to thank everyone that has been here with us for your contributions. Thank you so much. And I believe as we speak out and share these informations outside there, we can be able to save someone's life, and we can be able to prevent suicide in whatever platform we get or wherever we are. So kindly, since we guys are informed, share that information with the others outside there so that they can be able to help others. And I hope you've been able to also fill in our post-survey form, because again, your feedback is very important so that we can also know what other topics to engage in or what other areas to explore, especially around mental health and young people. So kindly fill in the post-survey for me. I'll leave it for like 5 minutes or 2 minutes. So if you have not filled it up, kindly do so. And if you have no access to it, also kindly inform me so that I can reshare it. Otherwise, thank you so much, and looking forward to see you next time, and have a lovely night. Thank you. You can unmute.